My first notable accomplishment came on May 14th, 1973. I was 9. A large crowd is gathered outside Fernbank Science Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Upturned faces scan the night sky, yet it was little I on that historic evening spotted Skylab, not long after its launch from Kennedy's Space Center, arcing across the heavens. And for this, I received a certificate, which I still have. It says, in recognition of observational proficiency. Did I peak at that moment? One would assume so. But then years later, I ended up writing for a bunch of TV shows you've probably heard of, and then that was upstaged by a stunning third act turn. I am the boyfriend, now fiance, of a supermodel I met on a dating app. Why would such a woman be interested in me? You and everyone in the universe and on social media may repeatedly ask. There are two answers to that question, one superficial, the other less so. Superficially, it's because I picked a good song to go with my profile pictures. I hesitate to share this because it's a ringing validation of that Nick Hornby, John Cusack, high-fidelity worldview. That if you could just assemble the platonic ideal of a mixtape, you could make any woman fall in love with you. That the perfect song can somehow ensnare the perfect woman. Yet, in my case, it happened. On the app we were on, here's what a profile consisted of. 8 to 10 photos, underscored with a song of your choice, a brief self-description, and a link to your Instagram. My profile pictures were a disaster. I learned this much later, unfortunately. It might have been wise to ask one of my excellent collection of excellent female friends to vet my selections, yet I was too shy to do that, so I chose some truly tragic photos. Jeff with the rimless glasses, who thought made him look like Steve Jobs, but which he later learned cast him as a dentist in a David Cronenberg film. Jeff holding a vintage Polaroid camera. Yeah, that doesn't scream freakazoid. Jeff with his '66 Volvo. Women love seeing your car. The only thing better is you holding a fish you just caught. And then there was my description of myself, also catastrophic, as it turned out. 6'7". True. Yet I've since learned it's a freakish and off-putting number. Most guys round up. 6'7", however, says you're 8 feet tall, rounding down so you don't terrify me. Ambidextrous. Why was I telling women I don't know which hand to use? Southern, but you can't tell till you get to know me. Why was I telling women I could be a closet racist? And finally, greatest accomplishment, convincingly mimicking the traits of an extrovert. Why was I telling women I believe lying is what I'm best at? As for my Instagram, at the time it was a meager showcase for my hobby of analog photography, hence my 8 followers were treated to the occasional grainy black and white photo of plants and buildings. It was basically the Instagram of a serial killer. Bottom line, what I was offering was disaster, catastrophe, Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. It's amazing any woman liked me at all, yet one did. And now, as I said, only the musical taste saved me. And now I see all you John Cusacks leaning forward, breathlessly awaiting what that one true song was which turned the tide. You're never going to believe it. Here it comes. The song was Modern World by Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. Now, maybe you've never heard of Jonathan Richman. Maybe you only know him as the adenoidal troubadour from There's Something About Mary. But the ones who do know them, the music nerds among you, I'm sure, are astounded. Yet it turns out I had inadvertently struck a pleasure center. My gal loves Jonathan Richman. Her oldest son is named after Jonathan. An ex-Modern Lover was in her late husband's band. So Modern World was the ideal song, despite my boldly promoted shortcomings, to pique her interest. Her song, by the way, was the Galaxy song from Monty Python's Meaning of Life. How great is that? A strong choice, funny song about astronomy. Count me in. So she and I connect and we begin texting. And then apropos of astronomy, I told her when I was a kid I wanted to be an astronaut, but I soon grew too big for a space capsule. When you were a kid, I said, what did you think you wanted to be? Now, my fiance has been interviewed a lot over the years. She's been on a lot of first dates, yet she later told me no one had ever thought to ask her that question. Her answer, by the way, a cleaning lady or a postal worker. How great is that? We text some more, we're really enjoying each other, and then, since I was stuck here in LA on a TV job, I asked if she might want to brew up some tea and chat on FaceTime. Now at this point I feel obliged to take note of what should be blindingly obvious. My expectations were rock bottom. Nothing's gonna happen here, right? She's fabulous, I'm not. She's East Coast, I'm West. At best, I'm going to add one more to that excellent collection of excellent female friends, but why not? So we get on FaceTime, we sip our tea, and we talk. She's incredibly funny, dazzling intellect, the best read person I've ever met. And over the next few weeks, we progress from tea to white wine to tequila, and the conversations get longer and longer. The last went 6 hours. Wow. And I want to stress, nothing sexy is happening on the FaceTime. We're just talking and laughing and getting to know each other. Meanwhile, what I fail to realize is, on her end, she's confused. Why isn't this guy advancing an agenda? Why isn't he asking me out? Of course, you know why I'm acting this way. Because I am a worm and no woman would ever want to be with me, particularly a fabulous one. So in this case, and only this case, low self-esteem did me a favor. This chatting goes on for a month, and then one day she sends a fateful text. I love talking to you. We have a surprising amount in common, and that makes one feel kinship, recognition, definitely interest. So when are you coming to New York? How's this weekend? And then it was on, and it's still on, but I gotta rewind for a moment because there was something in our first conversation which turned out to, well, I gotta rewind some more. The year before the events I've just described was a very tough year. It started okay. I signed up for that dating app, I started a new job, but then on the first day of work, I was awakened by a terrible phone call. My sister's boyfriend, her law partner, her partner in every part of her life had died suddenly. Everything stopped. The job, dating. I set everything aside, and for the rest of that year, I just helped my sister. Calls every night at bedtime, trips back and forth to Atlanta to help her piece her life back together. Nothing else mattered but being of service to a loved one in pain. Now, return to that first FaceTime call with the gal in New York. It's kind of our first date. So, she asked, you were married? Yeah, I said, for 25 years. What went wrong? I don't know why I responded this way, but here's what I said. Well, if you were to ask my ex, she'd say she married a raging narcissist who sucked up all available light. So she was perpetually in shadow and could never blossom into the person she was supposed to be. And is that true? She asked. It's a little bit true. Why in the world would you say that? Open with the most unflattering self-portrait imaginable. That's beyond a rookie mistake. That's Bill Buckner World Series, Scott Norwood, wide right, a fiasco. But now I gotta swing around to the gal on the other end of the call. She later told me this was one of her stock first date questions. If you're on the dating market in your 50s, clearly you're some kind of broken toy. So she'd ask the guy what went wrong in his previous relationship. Invariably, he would say, Oh, it's so sad, but she had borderline personality disorder. You think I'm kidding. She swore they said this 80% of the time. So when the man she just met not only didn't say that, but before even sharing his own version, told the story from his ex's point of view and copped to the fact it was valid, that was unusual, to say the least. Also dumb. You never do that, right? Admit to a narcissistic streak, say you might have wrecked the relationship. Why did I do that? Maybe because of those months of service, of setting aside my own needs, being just a little more selfless, and perhaps in doing so, realizing how much the rampaging ego had been running the show up to that point. So the other answer to the question, why would a former supermodel be interested in me besides my love of Jonathan Richman? Apparently it was that unexpected display of observational proficiency. Something that has not shown that much since I was 9. Thank you.